Welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you once again at BTV World, bringing you different stories from around the world and giving you an informed and of course different perspectives on the same story, so that you'll be able to decide on what exactly is the opinion that you want to form. We want to be able to bring you perspectives from all the different angles and of course include expert opinion, so that it's not just us who are saying it and you don't have to take our word for it, but actually be able to understand what it is that is going on both within Pakistan and outside in the world as well. Our first topic in today's show is regarding the S-400 defense missile air systems that have the delivery of whom has started to India. This is a false deal between India and Russia that was established back in 2018. The delivery of the first defense missile system has begun. The first unit is expected to be completed and delivered in the country by the end of this year. This, of course, puts India at the risk of sanctions by the United States. Whether or not the U.S. is going to go ahead with it is what remains to be seen. It had earlier categorically said that till the delivery of such units happen, they will not be really taking into account any option of sanctions. But now that the delivery has begun, is that a possibility, or will India be able to get a waiver? And then, of course, we'll be also trying to look at the strategic situation and the evolving situation that is developing with regards to India and the region. Moving on, we will also be taking a look at within Pakistan what is going on at the domestic front. There is news going about that the ruling party, PTI, is going through a troubled time. There is uncertainty that this is a challenging time for the government. We're going to take a look at this in depth, try to figure out exactly if that is exactly true or not, what really are the concerns and the possibilities and the options for the government and the opposition. Is this just talk that is being done by the opposition parties? Are the issues exaggerated? What exactly does the parliament, the powers of the parliament hold? What are the strategies that the opposition is dividing, and at what stance do they really stand on at the moment, considering that they're saying that they are planning to defeat or topple the government? Whether that is something that is going to happen or not, and whether or not there is any basis for that, is what we'll hopefully discover by the end of the show. So for the discussion on these two topics, of course, we always have with us Mr. Farooq Patafi and Mr. Raja Faisal with their expert opinions. Thank you very much for joining once again. And of course, we also have been joined by experts on this opinion for our first topic, which is regarding the S-400 deal between Russia and India. We have been joined by Indian journalist Mr. Rohit Sharma, who's been a part of our show before as well. And we've also been joined by international security analyst Mr. Fahad Masood. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us on the show.
Thank you.
We will start with you, Farooq. Considering the fact that we have this particular deal, we've seen that before in 2018. We have discussed at length the kind of situation that India, the Modi regime is working both internally and then, of course, its relations in the region as well. Considering the important dynamic that the U.S.-India relationship holds, does this particular deal put a question mark or add some shakiness at the ground on which the U.S.-India relationship holds?
Right. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I was actually thinking that you are going to open with our geopolitical analyst who is sitting right beside us, but I don't have any problem with opening. Regarding India, remember there are 2 or 3 very important things that you have to know and you have to remember. India has a procurement addiction. India has been higgledy-piggledy obtaining a lot of systems. When it comes to aeroplanes as well, you have seen how the Rafale deal and whatever went on while it was being procured or it was established was actually covered up by the CAG report. That is very important report, but they actually covered it because an Ambani Batada was involved. India has been procuring these weapons and keeps on doing it. without any understanding of how it is going to play out in the long run. Remember, when a country is rich, when it has its economy is growing, they think that the sky is the limit. But there are two cautionary tales that we have to talk about. One, the US under Trump, when he thought that things are going to be hunky-dory, and he managed to offset the value chain, right? It came under pressure, and today America is suffering because of it. The second example is China, which kept on actually spreading its wealth, and then COVID came, and now its economy seems to be under pressure as well. So India's economy at this moment is also shrinking. It hasn't grown that well, right, because of the COVID. At that time, when they were procuring it, remember that there are many systems in the world that they could have gone for. S-400 on books is thought to be very good. Russia has deployed it since 2007, and it has 400 kilometers range. So everybody says that it is a big one. There is one problem though, and that is that it has never been tested in a combat. And compared to it, there are other examples like Iron Dome. We keep on seeing it, that it is constantly under pressure, and yet it survives, right? So India might have procured it at a very lofty cost. The second problem is, even with a country like Israel, which is very, very intuitively creative when it comes to, weapon systems, even they had to replenish it through a grant or aid from the US. So there is a RAND report that came out that India will need exactly this much amount as it has paid already in the next 6-7 years, just to ensure that these weapon systems actually stay operational. And then they do have blind spots. One blind spot is that they can be saturated. Remember, it has two radar systems. One is engagement, and the other one is search radar. You can fool the search radar, and by doing that, you can actually create or wreak real havoc. Let me take you back to another very important thing. When Pakistan and India were eyeball to eyeball in 2019, if you remember, India managed to shoot down its own helicopter. And that actually tells you about another very serious concern, that it is not merely the technology, but the people behind the technology that matter. And if you are so rich and yet you are not manufacturing, but importing these technologies, you don't have the kind of muscle memory that might be needed to actually win a war or to ensure that they keep on functioning at an optimum level.
Faisal, considering the fact that Farooq mentioned that since perhaps these technologies may not have been tested in combat, isn't it the aspect of deterrence of such technologies more important to nations, considering now that is a far more important angle, or being part of this arms race where you keep on procuring more is more important than actually the potential usage of the equipment?
Sana, first of all, let me mention here that whenever it comes to Western politics or American politics, I always get a lot to learn from my senior colleague Farooq, and though he considers me someone who talks very well on geopolitics, and I consider it as a medal for me. About the topic and about your question, deterrence. Well, to me, how I see, S-400 is pointed towards. To me, it's pointed towards the Chinese. Why? Because Chinese had already procured it, and they had, deployed it against India. To me, I think it is for the Chinese, but to some extent, yes, Pakistan should be deterred about it, but there is a very important aspect about it, that Pakistan was already prepared for it. Since they started talking about Rafale, the procuring Rafale, and it was a $10 billion deal, and they got the Rafale because we saw Modi kept on talking about and blaming that we did not get Rafale in time. You remember he kept on saying, "Agar Rafale hota Now they have Rafale, and we are, anxiously waiting for them what they can do with the Rafales. They can't do anything. When it comes to Pakistan, Pakistan's forces, they were all, very proactive about it, and the technology they have employed, HQ-9 is there. They already went for it, and then there are the surface-to-air missiles. Pakistan has one of the most advanced missile systems with it. Babur is such a missile that can easily, tackle these S-400s or whatever. It would be astonishing for everyone to know that Babur has a capacity of going towards the enemy with a very low altitude that can't be even figured out by S-400. So we are all safe. We don't need to be worried about it. Why? Because the things India was thinking about, we have been thinking about, Pakistan has been thinking about it way back. And if we look at preparedness of India about its indigenous Teja, that has started flying now, and I think it's time that we should, hail India that after 30 years of constant hard work, they have managed to brought Teja in the skies. And if we look at the other things, it's all about Western countries, creating fears for India so that India keeps on buying their arms, and this is what is going on. And India, as my worthy colleague has mentioned earlier, that its economy, yes, it is $1 trillion economy, and they have a sort of capacity to buy all these, but at the same time, India is facing so many troubles, Indian people are facing so many troubles, but their hegemonic stance towards neighboring countries is making them buy all of these unnecessary weapons.
All right, let's bring in our guests in the discussion as well. We have been joined by Rohit Sharma, an Indian journalist, and Fahad Masood, who's an international security analyst. Thank you for joining us on the show, gentlemen.
Thank you, Bing.
Rohit, I'm not sure if you heard, but earlier we were having a discussion, and Farooq had mentioned that India may have a procurement addiction. Is that so, considering the fact that whatever's going on within India as well, and considering Indian economy, are these decisions, deals such as the S-400 with the Russians, something that the Indian side can afford?
Frankly speaking, a $3 trillion economy, and you're saying that India cannot afford this particular S-400. Now, firstly, I'll get to the gentleman's comment. India has a procurement addiction. Then what is PMS Sugri? Wasn't it procurement? And then, what about your drones? You take it from China. And what are you producing? You take tanks from China. You're procuring everything. Right, and now you're trying to compare yourself with India, a $3 trillion economy and $287 billion economy. It's a big difference. It's 10 times bigger. Now, coming back to this point, fact is, if we have procured it, the reason being we have threat on two sides, right? And the gentleman said that Indian economy is shrinking. You know how much business was done in this Diwali season? It was 1.25 lakh crore rupees. If you take it in literal terms, and no conversion is required between Pakistani rupee and Indian rupee, it comes to 1/8 of Pakistani budget, right? That was the money spent by Indians on Diwali only, and if you convert it, it becomes double, more than double. So don't go to the other Indian economy. The Indian economy is at the moment out of recession. Frankly speaking, 1,25,000 crore rupees is a big deal. Now, coming to it, we have threat on our side, and if we are procuring this particular S-400 was $5.4 billion, and we have just now said okay to 30 Predator drones. That's $3 billion, right? So if we are spending it for our security, there's nothing wrong. And the countries who sell these weapons, we have to buy weapons. Even Russia buys weapons. even America buys weapons. Why? Because you can't produce everything. One country will produce one thing which is very good, and the other country will produce another thing. Maybe it may be submarines, it may be ships, it may be aircraft, it may be radars, it may be missiles. America buys Israeli radars. Barak missile is the best. Why should we produce our own when we produced BrahMos, that is the best missile in its segment, and people are buying it. Even Russia, of course, that's a joint venture with Russia. Other countries are buying it. So we can't produce the best in every segment. We have to procure to get the best. So there's nothing wrong, and this is for our security, right? It is not an attack weapon. It is a defense. Anything coming from the side of Pakistan or China will be intercepted. It won't attack. For attacks, we have Agni, Prithvi. We have enough of weapons. We don't need that. We bought it just for our defense, nothing else.
Right, Rohit, considering your response earlier, let me just clarify that no comparisons were made as you were mentioning. And besides that, we were not just talking about in terms of the monetary values, but of course there are other costs to pay as well. We understand that such procurements also puts India at risk with relations with the United States. And it also seems that a lot of this is being done to appease relations with different countries and not just limited in terms of getting or diversifying the military portfolio of the country. Mr. Fahd Massood, considering the fact that we have seen that this, of course, puts India at risk under CAATSA of whether or not the U.S. decides to put sanctions on India with regards to this deal with Russia. I understand that India has tried to diversify its military portfolio or get into deals with the U.S. as well to ensure that perhaps they get a waiver from this. But does this not also puts a question mark on the relationship between India and the U.S.?
Well, question marks aside, one important aspect that I believe is of grave consequences, where do we take it from here? The Indian side going into a buying spree with the Americans and initially and now the Russians with the S-400 directly indicate that there is a regional arms race that is afloat. What is of consequence for India is to remember that we as a nation and a country fell down the rabbit hole and were forced into a Pressler amendment in which there was once again that waiver thing that came into place, and as soon as we as a country were deemed useless by USA, those waivers went away. So they're treading a very challenging line right now, a very thin line, as I may say. Overall, taking into account what the S-400 has capability and competency, yes, it is a defensive weapon. Yes, it is very competent. Yes, it has got capability to look trans-frontier across the width of Pakistan. That's its pluses. But as mentioned before, measures, thought process, threat perception was brought into play long time back once this deal was coming through, or in 2018 plus minus. How do we negate this SAM system or surface to attack missile system? The Air Force is already at par, if not above, in the case of negating this with the JF-17 and its armament on board. So nothing to be threatened exceedingly about. Yes, it is something to be concerned about, but nothing to be worried as a weapon system in the region.
Right.
What we need right now, a few words, is peace, stability, so that the common man grows. The national security paradigm of any country relates to not its armed forces but the weakest link, and the weakest link for all of us, both on the economic and the political side, is the poor man who is there. We need to ensure that he is able to get a decent meal, is able to generate value for society and not the other way around. So national security, as I mentioned before, is more or has more to it than meets the eye.
true.
Absolutely. Faisal, considering whether or not India is going to get a waiver from the US, does this mean that irrespective of the US's decision in this regard, the relationship between India and the US is going to go ahead unfaltered with regards to China, and that is only subject to change considering India's responses?
Sana, to me, I think there won't be any issues in that regard. I think India was portraying and is still portraying, and in future it would turn out to be the front line for the Americans against China, and there is no doubt about it. And to me, I think there won't be any sanctions put against them, and there is another reason behind it, because Indians, they saw that coming, so that's why they went for 30 Sea Guardian Predators that they are buying from the Americans. And my friend Rohit, he did a video on this yesterday, and obviously you can ask him about it as well, that very soon they will be buying 30 Sea Guardian Predators. And I think the amount of billions of dollars which they have spent towards Russia, equal amount they are going to spend for the Americans as well. So they are going to equalize the situations in terms of how many billions they are spending on these weapons. So to me, I think there won't be any trouble for the Indians. But as Fahad has rightly pointed out, that this is the situation, a dire situation for not only Pakistan but for India as well. India has a huge population that is living under $1.7 per day. So they need to think about it. And these are the fault lines of both of the countries, and I think rather than getting into an arms race and generating an arms race in the region, they should be looking after their own population and looking at the current balance of power within the region. Of course, Pakistan is equally balanced when it comes to India buying all of these, procuring all of these weaponry, and when it comes to China versus India, everyone knows that they have their indigenous productions, they have their own domestic production when it comes to defense. To me, I think India will lose in the longer run, because they are not relying on their own production, domestic production. They don't have that. But when it comes to China, they have their own. And same is the case with Pakistan. Pakistan has constantly worked on indigenous production, and Pakistan has successfully to some extent being capable of securing itself and in terms of defense, and we have proven it in 2019.
Right, Rohit, considering this fact and the situation regarding different countries and India's decisions with various of them, do you think that India is just deciding or playing at the hands of what different countries would like from the Modi regime or the government? The kind of decisions that it's making at the foreign policy level is there only because they need to avoid certain circumstances?
First of all, thank you for making me sit right in front of Raja Faisal, a very good friend of mine, and we look like the same. There's another gentleman who was also having the same hairstyle, so three of us. Now, coming back to the point, Modi government is not international relations and defense relations, not a matter of Modi government. It's a matter of every government, international relations and defense strategy, our defense relations, they do not change. So when it comes to what Raja Faisal has said is that China is our biggest enemy. 3 days earlier, our Chief of Defense Staff, Bipin Rawat, said it. China is enemy number one to tackle China. Pakistan is nowhere in comparison, and we don't have any fight with China, any fight with Pakistan anymore, because we know Pakistan is a very small country, and Pakistan cannot afford, apart from the nuclear weapons, Pakistan cannot afford to have a war with India, because you need money and you need oil to fight. And Pakistan is not in a mood to fight because Pakistan has so many problems, because Pakistan wants to develop itself and spend money on education and health. So most likely Pakistan won't have a war with India. But China does have intentions like that. So we are trying to tackle that, and Modi government is not trying to please any government. If Russia has better, we have very old relations with Soviet Union and Russia. Even today, more than 50% of our military hardware is from Russia or Soviet Union, our submarines, our ships. Even today, we are buying weapons not only S-400, we just bought a ship from them, a Navy ship. And America is a new entrant. We are using their surveillance, naval surveillance aircraft and some other weapons. So we want to have best material from anywhere we can get. We are buying Barak missiles from Israel. We have already bought them. They are in service. So what's the problem like if we are getting the best, right? We have taken other things from UK also. France, we have taken Rafale, and so on. We have taken Bofors from another country. So we take the best weapons.
Right. Rohit, we're almost out of time, so I'd like to bring Farooq in the discussion.
Yeah.
Farooq, why don't you do the honors of dispelling some of the erosions of our respective?
Right, and because this is the second round and I got the opportunity just now, I have there are many things that I have piled on, and I have to actually
take your time.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank Raja Faisal for his very kind words. I think it is a badge of honor for me to share, air with both of you as well. But regarding the other two guests, let me also thank them because they provided me with great metaphors. For example, when Rohit Saab was actually talking, Rohit Saab actually compared procurement with Diwali ke Patakhe. And we remember that Modi Saab had actually referred to nukes as the Patakhas on Diwali as well. So the very important thing to remember is not any comparison. I'm not comparing Pakistan's economy. I'm not going to compare India's economy with any other country. But if he insists, let me remind you that it is not the volume of GDP that counts. There are two other things which are very important. PPP, right? Purchasing power parity, right? And then per capita income as well. Compare it with the US, it is nowhere. Compare it even with China, it is nowhere. India has been actually shooting itself in the foot because it kept on procuring while it could have actually brought so many people out of poverty. It doesn't do that. And unlike China, because China has been actually focusing on that. The US does it, all other countries do it. And then with Narendra Modi's economics, I'm so glad that he actually spoke about economy, because I think that if any government should not be talking about economy, from demonetization to what they did with their goods and services or GST tax, this government shouldn't be doing it because it kept on attacking its own economy, and now India's economy shivers in its boots because Narendra Modi could not find an economist to run its economy while his predecessor himself was an economist. So at this moment the concern are two words, two terms. One, imperial hubris. The other one, let me quote Paul Kennedy, who talks about imperial overreach. And imperial overreach doesn't merely have to be territorial. It can be a huge investment in defense when your economy might be suffering. And this is exactly what is happening at this moment. Okay, now you want to compare yourself with Pakistan, or you don't want to, and you keep on saying that, Pakistan is not a significant country. Then why do you celebrate every time you are fighting a match in cricket with Pakistan? Why is it that your very capable pilot who flies really well is caught in Pakistan? And this is not for the first time. It happened in Kargil also. The problem is that India, if it has an addiction of procurement, it also has a unhealthy Pakistan obsession. And that obsession has ensured that while it keeps on growing as an economy, its mind stays in the third world realm because it doesn't want to move on.
Right. We are almost out of time. Unfortunately, I would have loved to give time to Rohit Sharma and Fahd Masood, who had joined us earlier on this discussion. But two of our respected guests on the other topic have also joined us, which is, of course, the opposition stance and what has been going on in the recent days regarding many different bills in the Parliament and the expected joint session tomorrow. What sort of uncertainty is there in the future? What do we see as a way forward, and what sort of options does the government and the opposition have? We will be discussing all of these issues in detail. We have been joined by President Pildad, Ahmed Bilal Mehboob, and we've also been joined by former Secretary, ECP Cover Dilshad. We will establish contact with both of them and help them join the discussion. Meanwhile, we will be discussing, of course, the situation regarding the opposition stance in the recent days. Faisal, we have discussed this at length in our show as well. We are expecting the joint session to be held tomorrow. We've seen that the government has tried to bring the opposition on the table as well to also address the reservations of the allies within PTI as well, who had reservations regarding many different bills, especially the EVMs as well. Considering all this and the talk that has been going on regarding PTI being in dangerous waters, do you think that the government or in the coming months, the political situation in the country can be unstable?
Sana, to me, I think the biggest fears for the government were the TLP, and TLP, if government could deal with them efficiently, I don't think that there will be any problems for the government for coming days. And as we mentioned yesterday, we talked about it yesterday, that the current policies of the government related to trying to improve the economy, owing to the fact that right now, Pakistan's economy is such an economy that had been affected, same as other countries. It had been affected by the COVID pandemic, and still Pakistan, is trying hard to bring it to the level. And I think the government's policies, they are working well in terms of economy. And when it comes to Pakistan's foreign policy, it has been working for Pakistan. Pakistan may have been facing in terms of external pressure on its foreign policy, but when it comes to Pakistan's importance in the region, it has improved and it has gained momentum. And these sort of unprecedented steps in foreign policy and in the economy, I think they are good enough for the government to stand and continue. And when it comes to government's allies, they are intact. And we know for the fact that yesterday, government had an excellent session with the allies, and it worked really well. To me, situation is all equal, situation is all good for the government, and I see a healthy output.
Right, Farooq, considering the fact that whatever happens in the joint session, it is going to be a test of the government's strength or weakness, or for that matter, the opposition's. We will see whether or not it has become this sort of a litmus test for all of these bills, whether or not the government really has the support of its allies in the parliament and, of course, the people at large. Is the opposition also just trying to test the waters to see exactly where it and the government stands?
Right, Sana, when it comes to these, bills, remember that even if they were to be defeated, it will not pose any serious threat to the government because these are not money bills, right? This is not a vote of confidence, or for that matter, vote for the leader of the House. So in that situation, it doesn't happen. What it does is actually, because if you remember, yesterday when we were talking to Fawad Chaudhry Sahab, who is the Federal Minister for Information, he pointed out that at the top of the list is the EVM bill and I-voting bill, right? The electoral reform, and then there are others as well. So what happens is it gives you a psychological edge if the government manages to pass it, opposition will actually get, there will be a blow to the opposition. But there is always a possibility that number can shift, that while it is ayes and nays, it can be open ballot as well, but there is a possibility, what if the government's MPs or their allies don't show up, right? But EVMs are important because of something else as well, and that's why I'm grateful that your current guests that are going to speak in shortly are with us, because it is not merely passing the bill. ECP, Election Commission of Pakistan, is a very important component, and it has been repeatedly opposing the EVM bill or the reforms. So what happens is that eventually, once you have passed, and I'm hoping tomorrow the bills are going to pass, but what happens after that? It is the Election Commission which is going to implement it. And it has repeatedly said that even if it has a bill, it won't be able to implement it because it doesn't have the capacity, it doesn't have the time. So at this moment, once again, it might be a show of power, although it will be a momentary one. It might not have the kind of lasting impact that we were expecting. Sana.
Right. It would be really important, of course, to talk about these, and we have been joined by the former Secretary ECP, Kaveh Dilshad, and we've also been joined by President Pildar. Ahmed Bilal Mahboob, thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. I'll start with you, Mr. Kaveh. Considering, of course, that the EVMs is one important bill that has to be discussed in the joint session, and the use of EVMs is really important to the transparency and, of course, the electoral reforms as well that the government has been pushing for. Considering the fact that this will be an important change, as Farooq mentioned, is the ECP, even after such a bill is passed, prepared to deal with the EVMs and actually implement this reform?
Election Commission of Pakistan is constitutionally obliged to maintain objectivity, impartiality, and neutrality, as per Article 218, 219, and 226. So first of all, the Government of Pakistan should resolve all the objections which have been raised by the Election Commission of Pakistan about the use of the electronic voting machine. It is the point of view of the Election Commission of Pakistan that there is no transparency, secrecy, and otherwise, Election Commission of Pakistan will not take its ownership before the resolution of all the objections which has been raised by the Election Commission of Pakistan. But so, first of all, the Election Commission of Pakistan should be taken into confidence to maintain the electronic voting machine, and the Election Commission of Pakistan should invite all the stakeholders and put up his brief about the electronic voting machine. EDC, electronic voting machine, Election Commission of Pakistan is not in favor because all the world countries have received the reports about the electronic voting machine. They are of the view that there is no transparency and secrecy. So first of all, the Election Commission of Pakistan should be satisfied by the Government of Pakistan. If the bill passed, yes, it will be passed tomorrow, but otherwise the decision will be taken by the Supreme Court of Pakistan as per Article 218 and 226.
Right. Mr. Ahmed Bilal Mahboob, considering this, and of course there are many other bills also which are at the table, and this is something extremely important now for the government because it has become a little bit more than just about passing the bills and what sort of outcome is there from these bills, but rather this is more of a test of power, or the fact that whether or not they have a stronghold of the government. How do you see the future of many of these controversial bills, including the EVMs in the joint session? Will the government be able to go ahead with EVMs or I-voting?
Well, from a legalistic, strictly legalistic point of view, if the bills are passed tomorrow by majority, they will become valid law after the President signs them. But especially those laws which relate to electoral reforms, if they do not enjoy bipartisan support and if they are not passed by consensus, then it will become very difficult to implement them. And it will be very difficult to hold free and fair elections, credible elections, which will have the confidence of both sides, opposition and the treasury. So I think tomorrow government may be able to score a symbolic victory, or it may be able to receive a setback symbolically. But I think from a democracy point of view, I think democracy will probably receive a setback tomorrow in either case, because for democracy it is very important that for electoral reforms, for having a level playing field, you must have the agreement of both sides. So I think that is my point of view. And secondly, especially from the standpoint of electronic voting machines and internet voting machines, internet voting, there are serious reservations of not only election commission but also technical experts about the practicality, about the implementability of the technology successfully, and there may be a lot of concerns. So maybe eventually it might have to be decided by the court of law, because this will be challenged in the court of law. And if you recall, last time in 2018, the matter was eventually decided by the Supreme Court, and they finally decided that this election in 2018 will not be, they will not employ the internet voting technology for the overseas Pakistanis in 2018. And this may have to be done even for this coming 2023 election.
Right. So does this mean that even if the bills are passed in the joint session, the opposition still has another way of stopping them?
Yes, I think so. There will be a legal challenge in the court. Whether they will be able to be successful or not, that's another matter. But they will certainly challenge not only the electoral reforms bills, but also I think the National Accountability Bureau bill. The opposition has already said they are going to challenge that in the court of law.
Right. Faisal, considering this, of course, is extremely important because more so than the passing of the bills, what is important whether or not the entire aspect and, of course, the outcome of these bills are helping further the democratic process in the country. And it's important, the government has always talked about being able to get everybody on the same page and build a consensus. Considering the fact that the government is trying to address the reservations of its allies, and like you mentioned earlier, the negotiations with the TLP, with the government and the opposition, do you think that irrespective of whether or not these bills pass, the parliament or the consensus that is needed to process such bills and whatever work is done prior to them will be achieved?
No, it will not be achieved. But when it comes to, importance of these bills, it carries a huge importance for the system, the democratic system of Pakistan. And the essence of democracy is in